Deep in the quiet corners of New Jersey, there are towns where life once thrived, now left to crumble in silence. Streets once filled with laughter now echo only with the wind. Buildings stand empty, their walls holding secrets of forgotten lives. Some say the past never truly left, that shadows still move where no one lives. These are the ghost towns you're not supposed to know about, and once you hear their stories, you'll never look at New Jersey the same way again. If you love uncovering forgotten places and chilling stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's hiding in the shadows. 1. Batsto Village. Batsto Village is a historic ghost town located in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. It was once a busy community that grew around the iron industry in the late 1700s. The village began when Charles Read, a businessman, built an ironworks there in 1766. The location was perfect for this work because the Pine Barrens had bog iron in its streams, plenty of trees for charcoal, and rivers for transportation. Batsto iron was used to make household goods, tools, and even supplies for the Continental Army during the American Revolution. After the iron industry began to decline in the mid-1800s, Batsto changed its focus to glassmaking for a short time, but this also did not last. The area then became known for farming, and the Wharton family eventually bought most of the land. Joseph Wharton, a wealthy businessman from Philadelphia, purchased Batsto in 1876 and tried to use the land for agriculture, raising crops and experimenting with cranberry farming. However, the village's population slowly began to shrink as jobs and industries disappeared. By the early 1900s, only a few families were still living in Batsto. Many of the houses and buildings were abandoned, and the place started to take on the appearance of a ghost town. In 1954, the state of New Jersey bought the land, including the village, and began to preserve it as a historic site. The remaining residents were relocated, and Batsto officially became a preserved historic village. Today, Batsto Village is part of Wharton State Forest and is open to visitors. The original mansion built by Joseph Wharton still stands, along with a general store, a sawmill, a post office, and several restored homes. Walking through the village feels like stepping back in time, as the buildings are kept in their historic style. There are no permanent residents, but park rangers and staff maintain the area for tourism and educational programs. Batsto has also gained a reputation for being haunted. Visitors and staff have reported hearing unexplained footsteps, voices, and doors opening or closing on their own. Some believe the ghosts of past workers or residents still linger there. Whether or not the ghost stories are true, the quiet surroundings, old buildings, and history of hard work and decline make Batsto Village feel mysterious. It remains one of the most well-preserved ghost towns in New Jersey, drawing history lovers, photographers, and curious travelers every year. It tells the story of how industries rise and fall, how communities change, and how the past can still be seen and felt in certain places. 2. Whitesbog Village. Whitesbog Village is a historic ghost town located in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. It began as a farming community in the late 1800s and became famous for its cranberry and blueberry production. The village was founded by Joseph J. White, who bought large areas of land in the Pine Barrens to grow cranberries. The sandy soil and abundant water in the area were perfect for this crop, and Whitesbog soon became one of the biggest cranberry farms in the state. In the early 1900s, Whitesbog became even more important when Elizabeth Coleman White, Joseph's daughter, worked with a scientist named Frederick Coville to develop the first cultivated blueberry. Before this, blueberries were only picked wild, but Elizabeth's work changed farming forever. This success brought attention and prosperity to the village, and workers' houses, barns, and storage buildings were built to support the farming business. At its peak, Whitesbog had a close-knit community made up of farm workers and their families. People lived in small cottages, shopped at the general store, and gathered for events. The cranberry harvests were busy times when everyone worked together in the bogs. Life in the village revolved around farming seasons and the demands of the crops. However, as farming methods changed and larger companies took over, small communities like Whitesbog began to fade. By the mid-1900s, most residents had moved away to find work elsewhere. The houses and buildings were left empty, and the village became quiet. The cranberry and blueberry farms continued operating in the area, but the old village was no longer a living community. Today, Whitesbog is preserved as part of Brendan T. Burns State Forest. The Whitesbog Preservation Trust works to restore and protect the historic buildings, including the general store, packing houses, and workers' cottages. Visitors can walk through the village, explore trails, and learn about the history of farming in the Pine Barrens. There are seasonal festivals, guided tours, and events celebrating the legacy of the blueberry and cranberry industry. Some visitors believe the village is haunted. People have reported seeing strange shadows, hearing footsteps, and feeling sudden drops in temperature, especially near the old cottages and barns. Whether these stories are true or not, the quiet atmosphere and weathered buildings give Whitesbog a mysterious feeling, especially on foggy days. Whitesbog Village remains a unique place where history and nature come together. It tells the story of hardworking farming families, important agricultural discoveries, and how communities rise and fall with time. Though no one lives there now, the spirit of the people who built it lives on through the land, the buildings, and the blueberries that are still enjoyed all over the world. 3. Double Trouble. Double Trouble is a historic ghost town located in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. The unusual name is believed to have come from a local story in the early 1900s. People said that beavers twice damaged a nearby dam in the same week, causing double trouble for the cranberry farmers in the area. Over time, the name stuck and became the official name of the small village. The community began in the late 1800s as a center for cranberry farming. The land around Double Trouble had the right sandy soil and clean water needed for cranberries to grow well. The Double Trouble Company was formed in 1909 to manage the farming business. Workers lived in small houses near the bogs, and there was a sawmill, a general store, and a school to serve the community. Life here was simple but busy, especially during harvest season when everyone worked together in the cranberry bogs. For decades, the cranberry business thrived, and Double Trouble was a hard-working, close-knit village. However, as technology improved and larger farms took over production, small farming communities began to disappear. By the mid-1900s, most of the residents had moved away to find other work. Many of the wooden houses and farm buildings were left abandoned and slowly began to decay. In the 1960s, the state of New Jersey bought the land to preserve it as part of Double Trouble State Park. The park now protects the old village, the surrounding bogs, and the natural wetlands. Some buildings have been restored, including the sawmill and a few houses, so visitors can see what life was like in the early 1900s. The cranberry bogs are still in use today, making Double Trouble one of the few ghost towns where the original industry continues on a small scale. Visitors can walk along trails that pass through the village and the bogs, learning about cranberry farming and the history of the Pine Barrens. The area is also home to wildlife such as foxes, turtles, and many bird species. On quiet days, the only sounds are the wind through the trees and the gentle flow of water through the canals. Some people say Double Trouble has a haunted side. There are stories of strange lights seen over the bogs at night and the sound of footsteps on the boardwalks when no one is there. Whether or not these tales are true, the peaceful but slightly eerie atmosphere of the village gives it a mysterious charm. Today, Double Trouble stands as a reminder of New Jersey's farming past, the challenges faced by small communities, and the natural beauty of the Pine Barrens. Even without its original residents, the spirit of the hardworking farmers who once lived here still lingers in the quiet fields and wooden buildings. For South Cape May. South Cape May was once a small seaside town located at the southern tip of New Jersey, near where Cape May Point is today. It began in the late 1800s as a vacation spot, attracting people who wanted to enjoy the ocean and the fresh coastal air. The town had summer cottages, boarding houses, a few shops, and small roads that led straight to the beach. It was a peaceful community where families came to relax during the warmer months. Life in South Cape May revolved around the ocean. People spent their days fishing, swimming, and enjoying picnics on the sand. The location was beautiful, with wide beaches and views of the Atlantic Ocean. However, the same ocean that brought visitors and beauty also brought danger. The coastline in this part of New Jersey is known for strong storms and erosion, and over time, the land along the shore began to disappear. The turning point came in the early 1900s, when several powerful storms hit the area. In 1944, a massive hurricane caused severe flooding and destroyed many of the homes and buildings in South Cape May. The land along the beach eroded so much that some houses were claimed by the sea. The damage was so great that it became impossible to rebuild. Slowly, residents left, and the town was abandoned. By the mid-20th century, South Cape May had completely vanished as a living community. The ocean had swallowed most of the land where the town once stood. Today, the area is part of the South Cape May Meadows, a protected nature preserve managed by the Nature Conservancy. Instead of cottages and shops, there are now wetlands, sand dunes, and grassy fields that provide a home for wildlife. The area is especially famous for bird watching, as many species migrate through the meadows each year. Even though no buildings remain, the story of South Cape May lives on in old photographs, maps, and the memories of people whose families once vacationed there. Some locals say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the faint sound of waves crashing against walls that no longer exist, as if the town is whispering from beneath the sea. Today, visitors can walk along trails in the preserve and imagine what the town must have looked like before the storms. The transformation from a lively seaside community to a peaceful natural habitat shows the power of nature and how quickly it can change the land. South Cape May is a reminder that while people can build and create beautiful places, the forces of the ocean will always have the final say. 5. Raritan Landing. Raritan Landing was once a busy river port town in central New Jersey, located along the Raritan River in what is now Piscataway. It began in the early 1700s and quickly grew into an important trading center. At that time, the Raritan River was a major route for transportation, and boats carried goods between the town and New York City. Merchants and farmers from nearby areas would bring products such as grain, meat, and timber to Raritan Landing, where they were loaded onto boats for shipment. The town was small but active, with warehouses, shops, homes, and docks lining the river. Skilled craftsmen, store owners, and boatmen lived and worked here. Because of its location, Raritan Landing became a meeting place for people from surrounding towns. It was not only a trade hub but also a social and economic center for the area. During the American Revolution, the town was caught in the middle of the conflict. British troops occupied Raritan Landing in 1776, using it as a base because of its access to the river. This caused hardship for the residents, as supplies were taken and some buildings were damaged. After the war, the town rebuilt and continued to thrive for several decades. However, by the mid-1800s, Raritan Landing began to decline. The construction of new canals and railroads made it easier and faster to transport goods by land, bypassing river towns like this one. As trade moved elsewhere, the warehouses closed, businesses left, and many residents moved away in search of better opportunities. Over time, the buildings were abandoned, and the town disappeared from maps. Today, there are no standing structures left from Raritan Landing. The site is now part of Johnson Park in Piscataway, and much of it is covered by open fields. Archaeologists have done extensive digs in the area, uncovering foundations, pottery, tools, and other artifacts that tell the story of daily life in the 1700s and 1800s. These discoveries are displayed in local museums to preserve the history of the town. Though it is gone, Raritan Landing remains an important part of New Jersey's past. It shows how rivers once played a central role in trade and transportation before modern technology changed everything. Some locals say the area feels unusually quiet at night, as if the voices of merchants and sailors still echo faintly from the past. Walking through the open fields where the town once stood, it is easy to imagine the busy docks, the creak of wooden ships, and the smell of fresh goods being loaded for the journey downriver. 6. Island Beach. Island Beach was once a small fishing community located on a narrow barrier peninsula along the coast of New Jersey. The area was rich in natural resources, with access to both the Atlantic Ocean and Barnegat Bay. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, families lived here in small wooden houses, making their living from fishing clamming, and oystering. Life was simple and closely connected to the tides and the weather. The location was beautiful but also very isolated. There were few roads and most people traveled by boat. Supplies had to be brought in from the mainland, and storms often made travel difficult. The residents formed a tight-knit community, helping one another through hard winters and rough fishing seasons. The waters around the peninsula were known for their abundance of fish and shellfish, and this kept the small settlement going for decades. By the early 20th century, the area began to attract wealthy visitors from cities who came for hunting and fishing trips. Large private estates and clubs were built along the shore, but the original fishing families continued their traditional way of life. However, as time went on, the harsh living conditions, frequent storms, and limited access to modern conveniences made it harder for people to stay. Many younger residents moved to the mainland in search of better jobs and schools. By the mid-1900s, most of the community had disappeared. In 1953, the state of New Jersey bought the land to create Island Beach State Park. The few remaining buildings were removed or left to decay, and nature slowly took over the area. Today, the park protects miles of undeveloped beach, dunes, and maritime forests, offering a glimpse of what the Jersey Shore looked like before it became crowded with resorts and boardwalks. Visitors to Island Beach State Park can still find traces of the past. Old wooden pilings from docks remain in the sand, and in some places, you can see weathered foundations where houses once stood. The park is now a popular spot for fishing, birdwatching, hiking, and enjoying the unspoiled coastline. It is also home to rare plants and animals, including the endangered piping plover and the red fox. While there are no permanent residents anymore, the history of Island Beach lives on through photographs, local stories, and the preserved landscape. Some say that on quiet nights, you can hear the distant sound of waves mixed with faint echoes of boat engines from a time when fishing boats lined the shore. The peaceful but wild atmosphere makes it easy to imagine the small community that once called this windswept stretch of sand home. 7. Walpack Center. Walpack Center is a small ghost town located in Sussex County, New Jersey, inside the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. It began as a rural farming village in the 1800s, surrounded by rolling hills, forests, and the Delaware River. The town was small but self-sufficient, with a post office, a schoolhouse, a church, a general store, and a few homes. Families lived off the land, raising crops and livestock, and the community was close-knit, with neighbors often helping each other during planting and harvest seasons. For over a century, life in Walpack Center stayed simple and quiet. The town's location in the Delaware Valley made it peaceful but also isolated. Residents relied on horse-drawn wagons in the early years and later on small roads to connect them to nearby towns. The population remained small, but the village thrived in its own way, built around farming and rural traditions. Everything changed in the 1950s and 1960s when the U.S. government announced plans to build the Tox Island Dam on the Delaware River. The project would have flooded the surrounding valley, including Walpack Center. The government began buying properties and relocating residents. Many people left, believing their homes would soon be underwater. Houses, farms, and businesses were abandoned, and the once lively community grew quiet. In the end, the dam project was canceled in the 1970s due to environmental concerns and strong public opposition. However, by that time, Walpack Center had already lost most of its population. The land, now owned by the federal government, was turned into part of the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. The buildings that remained were left standing but unused, slowly aging under the elements. Today, Walpack Center still has a handful of historic buildings, including the post office, church, and a few homes. They are preserved for their historical value, but no one lives in them permanently. The village feels frozen in time, with quiet streets, old wooden structures, and nature slowly reclaiming the land. Visitors often describe it as peaceful yet eerie, especially in the late afternoon when shadows stretch across the empty roads. The area is popular with photographers, hikers, and history enthusiasts who want to see what a rural 19th century community looked like. Some visitors have shared stories of feeling watched or hearing unexplained sounds, adding a ghostly reputation to the village. Whether haunted or simply abandoned, Walpack Center is a reminder of how quickly a thriving community can disappear when faced with forces beyond its control. It remains one of New Jersey's most atmospheric and well-preserved ghost towns. 8. Feltville Historic District. Feltville Historic District, often called the deserted village of Feltville, is a ghost town located in the Watchung Reservation in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. It was founded in 1845 by a businessman named David Felt, who bought land in the area to build a small mill town. Felt wanted a self-sufficient community where his paper mill workers could live and work. He built houses, a general store, a church, and a school along with the mill itself. The village had around 175 residents at its peak, most of them families connected to the paper mill. Life in Feltville was centered around the mill. Workers produced paper that was sold to printers and businesses in nearby cities. David Felt was known to be strict and liked to control many aspects of the community, including schedules and rules for the residents. While the mill provided steady work, life was disciplined, and the town operated according to Felt's vision. After David Felt retired in 1860, the mill was sold, and the town began to change. Different owners tried to keep the business going, but none had long-term success. By the late 1800s, the mill was shut down, and many residents moved away. The empty houses and buildings gave the place a deserted feeling, which led to its nickname. In the early 1900s, the area briefly came back to life as a summer resort. City families rented the old houses for vacations, enjoying the cooler mountain air and the surrounding forests. However, this period of activity was short-lived, and by the mid-1900s, the village was abandoned again. Nature began to reclaim the land, and the buildings fell into disrepair. Today, Feltville is part of the Watchung Reservation, managed by Union County. Several of the historic houses, the church, and the general store still stand, some restored and others showing their age. The area is open to visitors, and walking through the quiet streets gives a strong sense of stepping back in time. There are educational signs explaining the history, and during special events, costumed guides bring the story of the village to life. Over the years, Feltville has gained a reputation for being haunted. Visitors and locals have reported strange lights, footsteps, and voices when no one is around. Some believe the ghosts of mill workers or former residents still linger. Whether or not the ghost stories are true, the atmosphere of the village, especially in autumn or on foggy days, can feel eerie. Feltville remains an important piece of New Jersey history, showing how one man's vision created a thriving community that later faded away. It is a reminder of the rise and fall of small industrial towns and the way the past can still be felt in certain places long after the people have gone. 9. Milbrook Village. Milbrook Village is a restored 19th-century village located in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area in Warren County, New Jersey. It began in the early 1800s as a small farming and milling community along the Van Campens Brook. The fertile land, fresh water, and nearby forests made it a good place for settlers to live. Farmers grew crops, raised livestock, and used the water from the brook to power gristmills and sawmills. The mills were the heart of the village, providing flour, lumber, and other goods for local use and for sale in nearby towns. At its peak, Milbrook had several homes, barns, a general store, a church, a schoolhouse, and various workshops. Families lived close together, and the community was tight-knit. People depended on each other for help during harvests, building projects, and hard winters. Life was simple but hard work, with long days in the fields or at the mills. The village thrived for several decades, but like many small rural communities, it began to decline in the late 1800s. Industrialization, new transportation routes, and the growth of larger towns pulled people away. The construction of new railroads made it easier to get goods from elsewhere, and small water-powered mills could not compete with larger factories. Gradually, families moved away, businesses closed, and buildings were left empty. In the mid-1900s, the U.S. government acquired the land as part of the planned Tox Island Dam project. Many properties were purchased, and residents were relocated. Although the dam was never built, the land remained under federal control and eventually became part of the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. Instead of letting Milbrook disappear completely, the National Park Service decided to restore it as a living history site. Today, Milbrook Village has been carefully rebuilt and preserved to look as it did in the mid-19th century. Visitors can walk through the village and see the church, schoolhouse, blacksmith shop, and other buildings furnished with period items. During special events, volunteers in historic clothing demonstrate traditional skills such as blacksmithing, spinning, and woodworking, giving a glimpse of what daily life was like over 150 years ago. While Milbrook is no longer a true ghost town since it is maintained for visitors, it still holds an air of the past. On quiet days without events, the empty dirt roads, still water of the brook, and silent buildings can feel haunting. Some visitors have claimed to hear footsteps in empty rooms or voices from the church when no one is inside. Milbrook Village stands today as both a preserved piece of history and a reminder of how small farming communities once thrived in New Jersey before fading into memory. It allows people to step back in time and connect with the lives of those who built and worked in this peaceful valley. 10 Fowl Rift. Fowl Rift was a small riverside community located along the Delaware River in Warren County, New Jersey. Its name came from a dangerous section of the river where the water rushed quickly over sharp rocks, creating strong rapids. These rapids made the area risky for boats, but the same fast-moving water also made it a good location for mills. In the early 1800s, settlers built sawmills and gristmills along the shore to use the river's power for cutting lumber and grinding grain. The community grew slowly, with a few houses, farms, and businesses appearing near the river. Many of the people who lived there worked in the mills, fished in the river, or farmed the nearby land. Life was quiet and simple, but the strong connection to the river also brought danger. Floods were common, and the rushing water could be unpredictable. In the early 1900s, the area began to change. Fowl Rift became a popular summer spot for people from nearby towns and cities. Families built small vacation cottages along the riverbank, enjoying fishing, swimming, and boating during the warmer months. For a time, the community thrived as both a small year-round settlement and a seasonal getaway. However, the location's beauty came with constant risk. The Delaware River has a history of flooding, and Fowl Rift was in one of its most flood-prone areas. Over the years, several major floods damaged homes and property. The most devastating came in 1955, when the remnants of 2 hurricanes caused record-breaking floods in the region. Many houses in Fowl Rift were destroyed, and some were swept away completely. After that disaster, fewer people returned, and the community began to decline. By the late 20th century, Fowl Rift had lost most of its permanent residents. Floods continued to hit the area, making it nearly impossible to rebuild without the risk of losing everything again. Eventually, most of the remaining houses were removed or abandoned. The land was left to nature, and the area became quiet once more. Today, there are no active businesses or full-time residents in Fowl Rift. The rapids that gave the community its name still rush through the river, and the land is now mostly used for recreation by visitors who come to fish or explore. While nothing remains of the once lively summer cottages and small farms, the history of the community is remembered by local historians and in old photographs. Fowl Rift stands as a reminder of how powerful nature can be. It shows how a place that once offered both work and leisure could be taken back by the very river that made it possible. Even now, the sound of the rushing water feels like the heartbeat of a town that has long since disappeared.